record on this computer. Okay. Now, James, I want you to hit record as well, okay? I'm going to make you host so you can do the share screen. Yes, James, you're now the host.
Perfect.
But I'm going to say, oh, there's Melissa. Hi, Melissa. So welcome, everybody, to Aquarian Radio Network. And we're doing a panel.
Should be like this.
Everybody do.
Walking.
So I'm going to hand the hosting over to James Tolley, and he's doing a presentation on active measures. So he's going to be doing a PowerPoint presentation, and he's got a few videos for us. So welcome to our show, James. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are. Oh, our panelists are Russell Brinegar and William R. Thompson, who is my brother. And over here is Sasha Alex. Wait, Sasha Alex Lessin, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, who's my husband. And we have a guest here, Melissa Ebeling. Thank you. Welcome for coming. I did put this out on Facebook. We might have people join us. So but we're going to have people enter on mute. Okay, go ahead, James, and take it away.
Thank you so much. My name is James Tolley, and I'm a concerned American citizen. I live on Maui, and you know, I've been watching our political situation devolve my whole lifetime. I'm 52 years old now, born in 1968. And now that things have escalated in power struggle to the point where, you know, people are discussing civil war, people are discussing an election that is likely going to be contested. You know, people talk about fascism, people talk about the dissolution and the end of the United States empire. It's time to take a breath and see if there's anything to be gained by taking a longer view of the process that we've walked down over the last 40, 50 years, and see if there's any patterns that we can discern or recognize having happened. So I'm here now to share this information, and it might be a little triggering for people. You know, it's quite new, quite radical information, but it's very well documented, and I didn't make any of it up. You know, I got it from really strong sources that I don't have any reason to believe are forged or fraudulent. And so if I could just ask, I think there is a Trump supporter in attendance here. Is that true? Who is that?
That would be me.
Hi.
What is your
name?
William Thompson.
Hi, William. I'm James, and I want to take care of you, especially, and have a conversation with you, because I suspect you might be skeptical, more skeptical than other people on the call, and I really want to make sure that we're on the same page and we are developing a shared reality through this call, and we end the call hopefully in a shared reality. Otherwise, at least we'll have a productive conversation so that you at least understand where I'm coming from, and you have every opportunity to challenge or question the things that I say. Okay, and we'll just have a back and forth.
Okay.
And hope. Okay, thank you. So with that, I will just enter into it. But I want to say, before I get into the slideshow, and I have some videos of that I'll show you from the really the person who delivered the blueprint for active measures to us. His name is Yuri Bezmenov. So I have some videos to show to really, you know, expose you to the real original source material for where some of these ideas come from. And with that, I will get started with a slideshow. So, by the way, William, I just want to let you know that even though I start out talking about Trump's circle, I end by saying that we're all being duped, okay? So I just want you to know, because of the way that it's written, it just happens to be that way because there are some conspicuous statements that were said by some of Donald Trump's circle. But I believe that we are all being duped. And there are people doing the duping, and there are people on the receiving end of that duping. And I think all of us are together in wanting to live in a shared reality based on the best available evidence. And I think we're all in agreement that we want to have a strong United States and a strong free world that supports people's well-being and that is not driven by lies and deceit and manipulation and demoralization, but we want a world of human dignity. And so I think we're probably on the same page about that. And I think we're both, and all of us pretty much are being lied to. So that's going to be the thrust of it, just so you know. I'm not going to be scapegoating one side over the other, hopefully. And you can just let me know if you feel that's happening. Okay. So, active measures is the process that is driving the world. That's the idea here. So I'm just going to talk for a bit. If you have any questions, please feel free to speak up, and I'll ask for some Q&A or something like that a little bit later, so that we can have a little dialogue about it. So the bottom line, even this is before COVID started. So obviously with COVID, we're in a very not normal situation. But I'm talking about before COVID happened. So before COVID happened, we were still in a not normal situation in American politics, where we have grown accustomed to the situation, but we have become so divisive and divided that it's not normal. We haven't seen this kind of division before. So that's the number one thing that I'd like to create a shared reality with you all about, that we're living in a time that's absolutely not normal. So what was once just partisanship, which would be people collaborating, more collaborating than competing, but collaborating to drive the country forward in a good way. Now we have more competition between Americans in terms of what they want to do in the country. So that's a fundamental shift in American society. And we basically live in what I would call a manufactured culture war, often involving fairly trivial policies, like who can use what bathroom or what's going to happen to the DACA people. Meanwhile, millions of people who face real hardship, their needs are being ignored, right? The middle class is collapsing. There's an unbelievable concentration of wealth in very few hands. The power of social media, basically the power of Mark Zuckerberg alone, is preposterous in terms of human happiness and the safety and well-being of our republic, and the disinformation system and how it impacts our elections. So to have so much power in one young man's hands is ridiculous. So I checked the Washington Post today, but the Washington Post, according to them, Donald Trump has lied about 20,055 times since he was in office. And so this isn't normal, right? There's no president who has been accused of lying even 10,000 times or 2,000 times by a major news outlet. But 30 or 40% of the country, really pretty much 40% of the country, dismisses those reports without regarding them, really, just dismisses them out of hand. I wonder if we're on the same page about that, William.
Well, the way I see it is, Obama lied. Nobody kept count of his lies, but the media ignored his lies when he was president, because that's what the media does. It covers up for the leftists. Now, of course, they're going to accuse Trump of 20,000 plus lies or anything else they can accuse him of, because they hate him. They don't want him to be president anymore.
Okay, so if I heard you right, then you're under the impression that Obama lied many times.
Oh, yeah, he told one big lie that should have kept him from being president. He lied about where he was born. He was not born in Hawaii. He was not born anywhere else in the United States. He was born in Kenya.
We can have a very long conversation about that. I actually know about that topic.
Yes, we could.
And
but even Congress ignored the evidence of his lack of citizenship, and they still do to this day.
I wonder if you're
and
aware.
If you want to talk about being duped,
wonder if-
electing the president was one of the greatest hoaxes in this country or the world's history.
I hear that that is what you believe. I hear that. And I'd like to ask you a question. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are you aware that there have been Republicans, more than one Republican, who has stated that Barack Obama's birth credentials are as described? That he was born in
I'm aware
Hawaii?
a lot of people covered up for Obama that he does not have any genuine credentials, that the birth certificate
just
he
asking a
posted
very
online was a
specific question.
forgery.
William, I'm just asking you a very specific question, whether you're, I don't think we're going to resolve this conversation right here, so I don't want to get into it.
No, probably not.
But I just want to ask you if you're aware that Republicans have verified that Barack Obama's birth credentials are authentic.
A lot of Republicans are not real Republicans.
So have you heard that or not?
Which particular Republican?
Hawaiian Governor Linda Lingle, for example.
When was he governor?
The state of Arizona, for example.
When was he governor of Hawaii?
Oh, Linda Lingle was governor of Hawaii during Obama's first term. But I don't want to get into details about it. I just want to let you know, I just want to create a shared reality around the idea that there have been Republicans who have verified, who are in a position to know, actually, not just people, but people who are in a position to know. And those people have said that he was born in Hawaii. So I just wanted to say that. Well, let's just put that on the side.
And
so
I already said that Congress was presented with the evidence that Obama's birth certificate was forged, and they all ignored it.
Yeah, I hear you. We could get into that conversation forever and probably not
If you want to
resolve
talk about being duped,
Listen, you're
we're
kind
being
of
duped
making my
from
point.
by a lot of people in power.
Listen, man, you're kind of making my point because all I'm trying to say is that we're in a time, and that time is characterized by an abnormal situation, period. And you're saying it's
right,
abnormal, and I'm saying it's abnormal. We're on the same page. So,
and I'm saying it involves
details of
all the powers, almost all the powers in this country at the top, and that includes people from both parties.
Okay, well, anyway, we're in an abnormal time where, according to you, a president who wasn't eligible to be president was president. I'm saying we're in an abnormal time as well. So if we can go ahead with that reality.
Can I say one more thing? Now, the vice presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, is also not a citizen of this country, and not a natural born citizen.
I'm sorry, I want to stay on topic, okay?
Okay.
So the next situation that I'd like to ask everyone to consider is that this abnormal situation, most people think that it's kind of just happening. You know, it's due to social media filter bubbles or information silos or just growing divisiveness and partisanship in society or, you know, whatever. But I would, I'm here to provide you a perspective that questions that and that says it's actually intentional. And I just ask you to set aside any skepticism you have and just try it on. You don't have to take on the perspective, but just play around with it and just consider the perspective that this polarization, this growing divisiveness that is on the path to civil war is intentional. That's all I'm asking you to consider. And so if we consider that perspective for a second, is there any evidence to suggest that that might actually be the situation that we're living in? And the answer is yes. And that's the point of this talk. So we start with Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon has quite a resume. He's ex-CEO of Breitbart.com, which I would say is an admittedly alt-right news outlet. So alt-right is it's just a euphemism for white supremacy. And if you have any doubt about that, you can listen to Richard Spencer, who coined the term alt-right, and you can listen to the recording that was made by him that was leaked after the woman was killed in Charlottesville in 2019. where he says some pretty outrageous things, if you ask me, in terms of race relations and what he considers to be desirable. So he's also the co-founder of Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica is a criminal international election manipulation company. They were convicted of, it was actually demanded of them to provide data, and you can watch the movie The Great Hack if you want to know the details about that. He's ex-CEO of the Trump campaign, and he's an ex-senior advisor of the Trump administration. So he's got his hands in a lot of different pies, and he's very central to Donald Trump's world and his election, and elections in general. So Steve Bannon said something, and he was quoted in the Daily Beast by a journalist who he ran into at a party. Steve Bannon disavowed this quote. He said he didn't remember it, but I'm going to bring it up because the next slide is going to share with you why I bring it up. And this thing that this journalist said is, Steve Bannon said, "I'm a Leninist. Lenin wanted to destroy the state, and that's my goal too. I want to bring everything crashing down and destroy all of today's establishment." So Steve Bannon said that he didn't remember saying the quote. And, but I think you'll find some themes in this talk that suggest that maybe he actually did say it and he just didn't want people to know about it. I'm not saying he said it, but I do think it's important enough to include and just consider. So Steve Bannon did say, we call ourselves Fight Club. So Fight Club, about Breitbart.com. So Breitbart.com is considered by many to be a questionable news outlet. And Fight Club was a movie about a conspiracy to destroy institutions of society, specifically banks. So the Fight Club was a movie where the protagonists and the heroes, their goal was to destroy banks in order to, elevate human dignity and support a sane society. And so they call themselves Fight Club. And he was quoted as having said that he wanted to destroy the institutions of society. And here he is kind of identifying and self-identifying, creating a culture in his news outlet that romanticizes and identifies with people who share that goal. So on Inauguration Day 2017, he said, "The Democrats don't matter. The real opposition is the media, and the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with BS," essentially. He used an expletive, which I won't repeat here, hoping to keep this in a PG kind of a situation. So this is not a normal quote. It's quoted all over the internet. You can find it extremely easily. And I've never heard that this quote has been questioned in terms of its authenticity. This is an extraordinarily unusual and abnormal thing for an ex-senior advisor of the White House to say. So what he's basically saying is, the Democrats don't matter. The real opposition is the media. And the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with BS. So if we look in society today, we actually can notice, oh, the information environment is flooded with BS. It's pretty obvious. I hope none of us are going to be arguing that point. And here he's saying that he's going to be using a disinformation tactic called censorship through noise, which means if I just make a whole lot of noise, you can't hear the truth. And if I say a whole lot of noise, you can't necessarily distinguish what's true from all the lies that are out there. So it's a way to mask the truth. It's also called the fire hose of falsehood. So the fire hose of falsehood is a term that comes from critics of the Russian regime, which uses this technique to confuse its own people. So Russia poisoned a defector in England a few years ago, poisoning him and his daughter, nearly killing him. And when Russia was trying to cover their tracks, they came out with 20 different narratives for what really happened, so that they could basically confuse their own people and not have to have a grown-up conversation, essentially, on what the evidence really was and what everyone else in the entire world agreed happened. And there's plenty of evidence to back up the idea that Russia was responsible for it. There's incontrovertible evidence, shall we say. So he's saying he's going to use a Russian active measures disinformation tactic against the American people in order to win. Okay. I wonder how this lands with you, William.
Okay. Steve Bannon, okay, Breitbart, the founder of Breitbart.com, was murdered. Steve Bannon took over. I have not been a fan of Steve Bannon's since he took over, and I'm not a fan of Breitbart.com since he took over. As far as I'm concerned, Steve Bannon is irrelevant as far as conservatives are concerned.
But I'd like to just ask you about these quotes specifically. And I wonder how it lands with you that Steve Bannon is quoted as having said, and the way to deal with
Like I said,
is to flood the zone with
these
BS.
quotes don't matter to me because Steve Bannon doesn't matter to me. Whether he said them or not, I don't care.
So it doesn't matter to you. If I'm hearing you right, you don't care that an ex-senior advisor in the White House said that he was going to flood the media with BS.
Well, maybe there's a reason why he's an ex-senior advisor in the White House, and this may be one of them.
So in your opinion, his having done that and his having been involved in Cambridge Analytica, which was involved in fraudulent election manipulations around the world, doesn't reflect badly on the Trump administration?
Not if they fired him because they found out what he really is or what he really does. But they didn't have enough evidence to prosecute, probably.
So you just kind of trust that they weren't in on it, that they didn't really know about it, and they fired him because they didn't want to be associated with an election manipulator and with
Right.
a disinformation agent. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know.
Well,
I'll get back to you in a little bit. We'll follow
okay.
up in a little bit, okay?
Okay.
So another quote from Steve Bannon is, "Darkness is good. Dick Cheney, Darth Vader, Satan, that's power. It only helps us when they," and this, who he was referring to by the word they was not clear, but the journalist who took down this quote thought that he was referring to liberals in the media, but he may have been referring to everyone or other groups. So it only helps us when they, liberals in the media, get it wrong, when they're blind to who we are and what we're doing. So this is an interesting quote because he's basically saying he's part of a conspiracy, right? People are blind to who they are, what binds them together, who the group is, what their ideals are, what their ideology is, what their plans are, what their methods are, and we're blind to what they're doing. So this is Steve Bannon saying, I am part of a conspiracy and we are manipulating people's enemy images, the enemy thoughts that they have in their head. We are instilling enemy images inside people's thoughts, getting them to hate other people and think that other people are evil. And when we do that, we're really exercising genuine power and we're winning. Okay, so I want to be clear on this because I want you to know I'm not coming out with a big conspiracy theory like I'm making it up from nothing. I'm actually just taking Steve Bannon's word for it that he's part of a conspiracy and that he's manipulating people into hating each other and fearing and resenting each other.
I want to ask you, who is Steve Bannon? Why do you think he's influential? What power does he have?
Steve Bannon is influential. That's a good question. So Steve Bannon was ex-CEO of the Trump presidential campaign.
Okay, that was then. What about now?
Well, that was only it might seem like a long time ago, but 4 years ago, to be the CEO of a successful US presidential campaign, that person is a significant person. Are we on the same page about that?
We're at the end of the 4 years and we're in the middle of a presidential campaign. Is he influencing the campaign now, and do you know how?
So it sounds like you just don't think that Steve Bannon is influential anymore, and you really don't even know why I'm bringing up these quotes.
Well, you're the one that's saying he's doing all this stuff, that he's some kind of conspirator. So where's your evidence of what he's doing now?
Right. So active measures, which is the topic of the talk, right, is a decades-long process, right? It goes on for decades, like 50 years or more. And so that's why I think 4 years ago is really not very long ago to have an election manipulation expert saying that he's part of a conspiracy and getting Donald Trump elected and saying that he's manipulating enemy images inside people. Creating tribalism is basically what that means, right? You take one community and then you teach them to hate each other until they really hate each other and they think each other are evil, and then they get into fights with each other. So that's the basic idea behind active measures, is divide and conquer, destroy a country from within. And so that's why I think this is important and worthy of our attention.
Okay, you're talking about election manipulation. Let's go back to Trump's election. What happened right after he won the election? What did Hillary Clinton say?
You know, I just would like you to know, I wonder if you'd be willing to do something for me. I wonder if you'd be willing to let me know what you heard me say. Do you know what I did? What was your impression about what I said? Can you repeat it back to me, what I said?
No, I can't.
So let me say it again, and I would love you to just repeat it back so I know that I've been heard, okay? So what I said is that active measures, the core idea behind active measures is you start out with a country that has a single community, and over time you get that community to split into two and hate each other and then fight each other and destroy their own country. So that's the essence of active measures. Can you let me know what you heard me say?
Okay, you're saying active measures over time divides a country, and that's how they bring it down.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate your saying that. That's the point of this talk, is to see, does that pattern of active measures, does that look familiar in American society today? And I wonder if you can see
Today it does.
any similarities in American society with what we just described.
I can compare today's society with the way it was back in the 50s, because I'm 73, and I grew up in the 50s, and the America in the 50s was nothing like it is today.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know if you're aware that they call the 50s the golden years.
I don't doubt it. Yeah.
Okay. So, but from what I've learned, the actual plot against America to turn it into a socialist country started back with Woodrow Wilson, with the passage of Social Security and the progressive income tax. And ever since then, the leftists, the socialists, communists, whatever you want to label them, have been working to destroy this country and turn it into a socialist totalitarian state.
So, but without
I don't go back decades, I go back 100 years.
Getting into the details of that, William, I just want to know if you know, we just were in a shared reality about what active measures was about, which was you take one community and you divide them, get them to hate each other, and then you get them to fight with each other until they destroy their whole country. And I wonder if you can see anything similar between that pattern or that story and what we see in America today.
Oh yeah, I see it.
You see it. Can you describe it for me a little bit?
Yeah, riots in Portland, Seattle, Cincinnati, New York.
Yep.
Just about every major city in this country has some kind of problems, and they're very serious.
Yeah.
And they're not being dealt with.
Yeah. And I think you probably might think that, or at least I think, and I would check in with you, whether you think that the country is very divided now.
Yes, it is. It's divided practically down the middle.
Down the middle, and we might even be looking at civil war. Is that?
Yes, that's a distinct possibility.
Right. So what you do in active measures is you take a country, you divide them, you get them to fight with each other, and you escalate those power struggles over decades until civil war or invasion, or you take over the country without having a single shot be fired. So civil war being on people's minds now is another reason to think that active measures might be happening. Would you agree with that?
I agree, and I also agree with the part about, you just said something about, could you repeat yourself, please?
I'm not sure I could. I just kind of made it up off the top of my head.
Well, you said something about they could be like taken over with one stroke or something.
Taken over without firing a single shot.
Okay. Okay. Well, if it depends on who wins the election. If Trump wins, it's still very likely there will be a civil war. If Biden wins, then the left will have won, and they'll take over the country.
So either
That's
way,
how close
basically,
we
you're
are.
seeing
That's how close we are to what you're saying is
that's
the goal, and that's what they're almost at it. They've almost reached their goal.
yeah. Well, one side and the other, who knows who is actually trying to take over. Maybe there's something that we haven't been seeing, and that's the topic of this talk. So if you and I are on the same page, my friend, we see that civil war is like imminent, and one side is going to win, one side's going to lose, but there are definitely two sides, and they are not we're not a single community anymore. Oh, Janet, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, I would, I think it'd be really good, since I've had this argument with my brother dozens of times, to do a
I'm
little
not having an argument with him,
information.
just so you know.
Yeah, because
I think we're having a good discussion.
we have like just 2 hours, and then I want people to understand the concept a little bit more, and we can do some more, like take notes. Anyway, that's my concept. What do you think, Sasha?
Okay,
I want to hear your presentation, but unless you deal with Bill and the people he represents, we're not going to have the meeting that we need. We need to listen to Bill. We need to feel his heart. We need to help him meet his needs just like we need ours. And I love what you're doing, and I want to hear more from you, Bill.
Okay,
Thanks.
so I'm getting triggered.
Thank you, Sasha.
The sister is getting triggered, and I want to hear more of the I'm a very Spockette, right? I like to hear more of the intellect, and then I think there'll be less argument. I think if we get the logic out to the world, then there'll be less argument. But
this is the whole point. We got to reach
I'll
out.
continue
We're
talk for a while.
Exactly the way you're doing, James. That's how we reach across, and I love it.
And I understand what you're doing, and so I'm going to sit back. I yield to the vote here, and I'll just I'll shut up. Go ahead.
No, I want you to meet your.
I will
Here, get back to the screen, honey.
continue.
Throwing away. Go ahead, James. Take back.
Feel free to jump in, and I'll continue. So according to the quotes that were from Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon, again, it was a very, very central figure 4 years ago. 4 years is not a long time in terms of active measures. So that's why I believe that he is important, or was important, and what he was doing 4 years ago was certainly important. So he said he's part of a conspiracy. They're fomenting enemy images among Americans. They're flooding the media with disinformation. But we don't know who they are, and we don't know what they're doing, right? So that's the point of this talk. It's a conspiracy. It's not me saying it, Steve Bannon saying it. So who are they, and what are they doing? This is the point of the talk. So I have 4 foundational documents that I look to create my perspective around this information. 3 of them come from KGB defector, high-level KGB defector, Yuri Bezmenov. So Yuri Bezmenov defected in 1970, and he was discovered by the Soviet Union to be living in Canada in the early 80s. And they asked him to, be shipped back to the Soviet Union. Canada did not go along with that request. And so he just felt like he would just share what he knew about with active measures with the world as a way to protect Western civilization from a serious threat that he knew we were up against. The other document comes from a man who's called the father of modern conservatism, and his name is Paul Weyrich. So Yuri Bezmenov, he gave us the blueprint for active measures. It's actually a beautiful, beautiful gift. In fact, the pamphlet that he wrote was called Love Letter to America. And he was destroying, working in East Pakistan in 1970, destroying East Pakistan as part of an active measures campaign. And he got religion, he really fell in love with the Indian people. He suddenly realized that the Soviet Union wasn't exporting brotherly love. They were just a bunch of murderous thugs. And so he just defected, and he fell in love with the West. And so anyway, he gave us these documents. He gave us an interview. It's about an hour and 20 minutes long. He gave us a lecture that's about an hour and 20 minutes long. And he wrote a pamphlet that's about 40 some pages long. And the important parts of the blueprint start on page 19. He wrote some other things too, but these are the most important in terms of understanding the blueprint itself. You know, there's a lot of good information about him and his background and other things. And there's actually a lot of other material, or a good amount of other material about active measures, but they're usually anecdotal things from KGB agents who have defected, stories, ideas, but nothing like what Yuri Bezmenov left us. He left us the literal blueprint to the process. So the fourth foundational document is from Paul Weyrich. His organization called the Free Congress Foundation created a manifesto under his leadership, and it was describing how they were going to create fundamental societal change. And the methods that he describes in his manifesto match up very, 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 very well with the tactics and of active measures. So the conclusion of the introduction, just so we're on the same page, is the US political situation is not normal or natural, I would say. Steve Bannon said he's part of a conspiracy. His group is spreading disinformation. They're stoking enemy images between Americans. Active measures is a blueprint for radical social change. Paul Weyrich wanted to employ these techniques. His organization includes several disinformation agents, some of which have advised the Trump administration. There's a slide that I got out of order. I apologize for that. That slide says that Paul Weyrich, he founded an organization right after Ronald Reagan was elected. By the way, Paul Weyrich co-founded the Heritage Foundation, just so you know. So he's like very, very deep into conservative think tanks in the conservative world. He really created a lot of it, which is why he's called the father of modern conservatism. And he created another organization called the Council for National Policy. And he founded that around 1981. And that group's membership is actually secret, but it was leaked in either 2011 or 2014. And among its membership is Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway, Jerome Corsi, who is the father of birtherism and all the claims that Barack Obama was not eligible to be president, and Tom Fitton, who has been on Fox News countless times. He's the head of Judicial Watch. And so there's other people who have been involved in questionable elections and things like that. For example, the Ohio 2004 election, presidential election, a lot of stories have been told about the questionable nature of that election. And the Secretary of State of the state of Ohio at the time was a member of the Council for National Policy as well. So that, I'll go into that in great detail a little bit later. So you might be thinking, this sounds like another conspiracy theory, but it's not my theory. Steve Bannon said it. And I didn't invent Yuri Bezmenov, and I didn't invent Paul Weyrich. I didn't invent any of this. I'm just showing you what's in the public record already and asking you to consider it. So I strongly recommend that you watch all of these original documents. You read the pamphlet, you read the manifesto, and really familiarize yourself in detail with these, because they are incredibly important to our current situation, in my opinion. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a taste of what they contain right now. So here we go. All right. This is our first step into Yuri Bezmenov. This is Yuri Bezmenov giving a lecture on active measures.
The theory of subversion goes all the way back 2,500 years ago. The first human being who formulated the tactics of subversion was a Chinese philosopher by the name of Sun Tzu. 2,500 years BC. He was an advisor for several imperial courts in ancient China. And he said, after long meditation, that to implement state policy in a warlike manner, it's the most counterproductive, barbaric, and inefficient to fight on a battlefield. You know that war is continuation of state policy, right? So if you want successfully to implement your state policy and you start fighting, this is the most idiotic way to do it. The highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in the country of your enemy. such time that the perception of reality of your enemy is screwed up to such an extent that he does not perceive you as an enemy, and that your system, your civilization, and your ambitions look to your enemy as an alternative, if not desirable, then at least visible. Better that than dead. That's the ultimate purpose, the final stage of subversion, after which you can simply take your enemy without a single shot being fired. The subversion is successful. This is basically what subversion is.
So he said, if not desirable, then feasible. So you want to convince the target population that your philosophy or your ideology, your way of life, is an alternative to one that has been destroyed by your enemy. So if you can convince your enemy that you actually haven't been destroying them this whole time, then maybe they think you're a good guy. But maybe it's just propaganda that has you feeling that they're good people who are acting in good faith. So just one more video of Yuri here.
If we take the whole time, money, and manpower that the Soviet Union and KGB in particular spends outside of the USSR border, we will discover, of course there are no official statistics unlike with CIA or FBI, that the espionage as such occupies only 10 to 15% of money, time, and manpower. 15% of the activity of KGB. The rest, 85%, is always subversion. And unlike a dictionary of English, Oxford Dictionary, subversion in Soviet terminology means always a destructive, aggressive activity aimed to destroy the country, nation, or geographical area of your enemy. So there's no romantics in there, absolutely. No blowing up bridges, no microfilms in Coca-Cola cans, nothing of that sort. No James Bond nonsense. It's most of this activity is overt, legitimate, and easily observable if you give yourself time and trouble to observe it.
Okay, so yeah, it's pretty essential to what the KGB was doing, and I'd like to point out, there's another video that I didn't include in the slideshow where Yuri Bezmenov says, there's no such thing as grassroots revolution. Grassroots revolution might be reported in newspapers, but it's not actually how revolutions happen. And so if you remember back to 1991, when the Soviet Union basically transitioned in one day without, I think, a single shot being fired into what it is today, which is basically controlled by an ex-KGB agent, you might be able to imagine that the KGB got tired of taking over other countries and decided it wanted to take over its own country. I don't see any other reasonable explanation for that, because a country doesn't suddenly transition into another country in one day the way that happened. It just doesn't happen in my understanding of humanity. So I might be completely wrong. I don't know if there are any other examples of that having happened, but that's pretty instructive actually for what's going on now if you want to try on that idea. But what happened in the Soviet Union is pretty clearly the KGB is now in charge of the country through Vladimir Putin. It's pretty obvious to me. Yeah, so also what he's talking about with subversion, right? He's not talking about attacking people through violent means. He's talking about psychological warfare. He's talking about manipulating them and engineering society. And the way to do that is just to inject stories into society, to use media outlets, to use think tanks and things like that, to basically manipulate people, manipulate them into tribes, right? Get them to identify with certain things, manipulate them into tribes who then fight with each other. So it's a decades-long process of psychological warfare. It's overt. You can actually see it happening if you have the ears to hear it and if you have the eyes to see it. If you can open your mind a little bit, you can notice that there are narratives that we are familiar with that have driven people apart, and they've been repeated over and over and over and over and over again. And I can give you some examples of those, but I want to warn you that it may take a little bit of effort to see what I'm talking about, because you might have some preconceptions about them, and you might not be able to see how they actually fit this pattern of you take one community, you find the crack, and you tear them apart and get them to fight with each other. But I'll tell you about them in a couple minutes.
James, this is the universal process of colonialism that has been employed everywhere for centuries, and actually going way back to the time of Sumer. This is the so-called Tower of Babel as a description of exactly the same process, in my opinion.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, he said that it came from 2,500 years ago. It wasn't 2,500 BC. It was 500 BC, about 2,500 years ago. So I do imagine that those tactics have been used throughout that time.
Yeah.
I don't know if what you're talking about is way before that. I think it is, right?
Oh, it's way, way before
You'll have
that.
to lean into the mic. Just speak so we can see you. You're leaning into the mic. We can't see you anymore.
Yeah, what happened is Prince Marduk was building his own launch tower and communications, and his idea was to organize the earthlings against their lords at the time. And so Yahweh or Enlil bombed the tower and ruled that the scripts and languages could not be universal, and deliberately followed the same tactics. And this is 13,000 years ago, or at least 10,000 years ago. That's when this was happening in Sumer, Iraq.
Wow, very similar. Yeah, that's interesting how that's a very clear theme, pretty obvious in that story.
And the same thing happens in all the tribal, all the nations that were in the system of slavery we call colonialism. It was the same thing. Keep the tribal groups pitted against each other.
Yeah, yeah. Divide and conquer. That's basically going to countries and conquer them without having to fire a single shot. Just take them over. So I wonder if any of this sounds familiar in American society. Are we kind of on the same page still? William? Thanks, Russell.
Yeah, it's very familiar, and I think I repeat myself if I say that I think at the crisis, the peak of all this is coming very soon. It's coming on November 3rd.
Yeah, or soon thereafter. I would agree with you. So he kind of repeats himself a little bit here, but I think it's still valuable to listen to. Oh, whoops. What happened?
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see. There is no mystery. There's nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage and intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through the advertising, probably. That's why your Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process, which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
So, so the first thing I'd like to to highlight about that clip is that we've all been, according to what I'm sharing with you, we've all been on the receiving end of messages that have been designed over a long period of time to convince us to do things that are against our best interests. Yuri Bezmenov says to try to trick the masses into doing things that are against their best interests is, you know, a study as old as civilization itself. And so we shouldn't have any illusions about the idea that people want to trick the masses and trick you and me into doing things that are against our best interest. And so we probably have let some of those ideas in. So some of the ideas that we carry today are probably mistaken. And that's the idea I'd like you to just try to entertain, that perhaps some of the ideas that you've received and trusted and taken in, and they form your opinions today, right now, those opinions are not necessarily trustworthy. And we should really check to make sure that our opinions are accurate. We should not be trusting anyone who tells us things. That's my perspective personally. The other thing is that he also called active measures something called ideological subversion. So ideological subversion is a really much more descriptive name, of course. So when you have a community is a bunch of people, and they share an ideology, they share an identity, they share you know, problems, solutions, heroes, scapegoats, villains, right? So they all share these things in common, and because they share those things in common, they can act as one unit, and they are powerful. But if you start to convince them that they, you know, you start to inject reality upside down, which is an active measures technique. If you start to inject reality upside down narratives into that community, you'll slowly wear down the cohesiveness of that community. And so people, over a long period of time, where at one point they respected the police and appreciated the police for being, you know, brave protectors of the public good, maybe half the people in the country now might look at the police and think that they're a bunch of corrupt pigs. And that didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen organically. It probably happened because of manipulation. Similar with the military, similar with the media, right? The media at one point might have been actually trusted, but over a long period of time, you erode people's trust in the media so that some of the people trust some part of the media, some people trust the other part of the media, and then you have a situation where people can get into power struggle and arguments and actually create civil war. So that's kind of the nature of community and how you want to do that. So to put another way, this comes from a New York Times 3-part video series on active measures called Operation Infection, which I strongly recommend you watch, actually, because it's a really nice description of active measures on the micro level. So on the small scale level, they show very clearly what active measures is about. They even mention Yuri Bezmenov's name. But what they do not mention, conspicuously, if you ask me, is they don't mention that there are 4 phases, and they don't look at the macro, and they don't compare it to American society, which is like it matches up so completely, it's preposterous. So they don't mention that. So that's one of the main reasons I no longer trust the New York Times, actually. So if you wanted to look into that and see how absurd it is that what they mention and what they failed to mention, you might learn something, or at least better understand me and my perspective about it. So what you do with active measures to crack a society apart and get them to fight with each other so they can no longer fight you is you find the cracks in society. It could be between blacks and whites or yellows and greens, as Yuri Bezmenov says. It doesn't matter what the crack is, young, old, rich, poor, etc. It doesn't matter what the crack is. You just, where there is rapport and trust and a shared identity and a community between people, you want to destroy that community and that sense of community and that sense of trust. So you start out with a big lie, you know, a huge lie. And, you know, the idea that Barack Obama was not eligible to be president, if it is a lie, is a pretty big lie. Are we on the same page with that, William? If it's a lie, it's a pretty big one.
Is that he was eligible to be president. That was the big lie.
Right. So one of those two is a big lie. Are we on that page?
Right.
One of those is a
Yeah, I agree with
gigantic
that.
lie, right?
Yes.
Right. So you start out with a kernel of truth. I'm trying to think of one. I guess I'm not going to come up with one in the moment. So you start out with a kernel of truth, something that actually happened, right? I can actually come up with one now. So Alexandria
I can't think of one
Ocasio-Cortez.
right now either.
Sorry?
I can't think of one right now either.
Well, one narrative around, and I hope you can appreciate this, William. This is actually one of my examples, because the lie is kind of absurd, and I hope you can see why I see that it's absurd. Even if you don't think it's absurd, maybe you can see why I think it's absurd. So AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was helped into office and coached into office by a group called Justice Democrats. Okay, so they felt like, we need to find people who are awesome and then put them in office. We don't need to find the people who want to be in office and try to get one of them in office, because we're missing out on a bunch of passionate, intelligent people. So what they found 4 people, and there was a movie about it, you can watch it. AOC was the only one in that group who made it in, but that's how it happened. And so she was taken under the wing of Justice Democrats, and she was put into office, and that happened. That's the kernel of truth. The world upside down narrative around that kernel of truth is, she is, and I want you to really listen to the exact phrase that I use here, because this is what has been repeated over and over again, okay? And this is why I say it's so absurd. She is a Manchurian candidate, okay? That's the claim, that's the narrative, that's the story around the kernel of truth, that there was a group that put her in office. Do you know what a Manchurian candidate is?
Oh, I sure do. Obama was one.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're going to believe that such a thing exists, then it's going to be hard to have you be in a shared reality with me that it's an absurd assertion, because the Manchurian Candidate is from a story. It's from a fictional story. It's a movie that came out in like the 60s. And such a thing, to anyone's knowledge, does not exist, or there's been no proof that anyone has ever been a Manchurian Candidate. There's no proof that I know about that ever existed, and it's just a label that people put on other people they want to discredit and character assassinate. So that's my understanding of the label Manchurian Candidate. It's just an over-the-top accusation that doesn't actually tie to direct pieces of evidence. So anyway, that's my perspective on it. Maybe you have a totally different perspective on it, but that's my example that I use. So anyway, I don't know if we're going to have a shared reality around that, but that's an example for me of taking something that is true. Or here's another one, right? Here's another one. And this is actually a really much more perfect example of an active measures thing, right? So if people start saying happy holidays to each other, so that's a true thing. That's true. People have been saying happy holidays to each other, right? And if you want to build a reality upside down narrative around that kernel of truth, it might sound like there's a war on Christmas, right? There's a war on Christmas, right? That is absurd, and it is blowing it way out of proportion. And I'm happy to see you nod your head a little bit, because Bill O'Reilly, like, he had many, many segments on the fact that there's a war on Christmas. And in my opinion, when you take a community and you tell half of the community there's a war on Christmas, the other half of the people are at war with what you find sacred. This is a well understood fact from Ben Shapiro, who is the head of the Harvard Negotiation School. He wrote a book, and he came out with 5 of the things that you can do in order to trigger tribal mind in other people. One of them was to assault what they find sacred. And if you're telling people that another group is assaulting what you find sacred, Christmas, for example, then there's going to be starting to be a tribal mind created around that, where the other group is other, and then there's a group, that's us. So it creates an us and them dynamic between Americans. That's a perfect example of it, actually. So anyway, conceal your hand, pretend, use a front group, use a media outlet, use a journalist who isn't associated with your organization, get them to come out with a reality upside down narrative, the big lie. Find useful idiots who are willing to spread your story thinking that it's true, and deny everything. So one of the key active measures things is deny, 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 even when the truth is obvious. This is, I want everyone in the world to know that people, sometimes when they try to manipulate other people, they deny, 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 even when the truth is obvious. And if people realized that, they wouldn't be taken in by narcissists so easily. They'd be well protected in their emotional state. And then number 7 is play the long game. So this is a decades-long game. All you have to do is chip away at a community's rapport, a bit by bit by bit, and just through the power of, you know, long-term goals, you can destroy a community's identity with each other. So to go into more detail about the macro of active measures, there are 4 phases to the process. First, you have to demoralize the people. That takes at least 15 years. Yuri Bezmenov says it takes between 50 and 20 years, but when I look back at American society, I see it happening at least 40 years ago, if not longer. The destabilization phase lasts 2 to 5 years, and the crisis phase lasts 2 to 5 months. That's when people are really shooting each other in the street. And then the normalization phase is ongoing. So I'm going to show you a little bit about those. The demoralization phase. You've kind of seen those videos, so I'm just going to show you another video that's going to tell you about it.
Exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boat crashes then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization.
So it takes a long time to condition a large group of people into having those characteristics. And that's why it takes at least 15 years. Yuri Bezmenov says that it takes 15 plus years because that's how long it takes to educate one generation of students in the target country to adopt another ideology. But I think at this point, psychological warfare has become so sophisticated that you can, you know, use other tactics that are much more effective. But the goal is similar or the same, which is if there's a group of people or even an entire country who cannot see new information when it's presented to them, that is a very, very weak population that is easy to destroy, you know, easy country to take over. And what I'd like everyone to consider is that we ourselves, us as individuals, are in that group that he just described. We cannot see evidence. No matter how much evidence is presented to us, we can't see it. And just try that on for a minute and ask yourself, how open are you to seeing evidence that contradicts your currently held beliefs? Because we're all human, right? We all have beliefs, we all have perspectives, we've heard stories, we believe things, but we're human beings, we're not God, right? So we might be wrong about things. We might be wrong about virtually anything that we can think of. And we don't know if we're right. And the only way that we can constantly find out if we're right is to consider the information that comes to us and constantly question our own beliefs and our own opinions, which literally always may be wrong. They always may be wrong. And so I wonder if you feel that you are open to hearing new information. And if you're not, if you can honestly look at yourself and say, you know what, I'm actually not open to hearing things that contradict my already held beliefs, then I want you to consider the possibility that you are in the group that has been demoralized. I wonder what comes up for everyone around that.
I'm not demoralized.
You feel pretty sure you're not demoralized?
Well, actually, yeah. Since the COVID started, it's been wearing on me. I can't say I'm totally demoralized, but I can say it's getting to me. And my current health isn't helping.
Okay. But do you feel that you are open to hearing information that runs counter to your already held beliefs?
I'm hearing what you say.
Do you feel that you would be open to hearing information about Barack Obama's birth certificate being authentic?
At this point, I think the evidence is overwhelming that it's a forgery. And if you looked at the evidence, I'd like to see what you think. And I can recommend that you look up, I think it's still online, Sheriff Arpaio's Cold Case Posse put together video with all their evidence of the forgery.
Yeah.
They tried to present it to Congress. They made copies for everyone in Congress,
Yeah.
but nothing came of it. But if you can find it online,
yeah, I'd like to share something about that.
Okay.
I'm familiar with that video that they came out with. It was an 8-minute video after 5 minutes of.
No, it's an hour and a half video, the genuine one, the real one.
Oh, we're talking about two different videos then. There was a news conference that they had 5 years after. It was their final news conference where they claimed that there were 9 pieces of evidence that proved that Barack Obama's birth certificate was copied from another birth certificate. And they had 9 pieces of evidence for that. And I'm going to tell you something pretty shocking, and you're not going to believe me, but I could go over it with you later, and I'd be happy to do that. 2 of the claims of those 9 contradict each other. And I'd like to show you just how stupid that video is, because you will be surprised and you'll probably learn something important about it. I wonder if you're willing to watch that video with me. Not now, but later.
If you find the hour and a half version and watch all that, then I'll watch your version.
I don't know what to say, man. I don't know what to say. It sounds like you're not that open to hearing contradictory information.
I'm saying,
wrong.
if you look at the hour and a half version, the original version, which I saw, and I watched the whole thing, then that's being open-minded and looking at the evidence. I don't know where you saw this 8-minute version, but it sounds like some debunker came along and tried to destroy an hour and a half video so that you would think that they were wrong.
Right. So I would like to just take another 2 minutes tops on this topic, because we're getting kind of into the weeds with something. I want to share something with you.
James, let Russell say what he wanted to say. Russell had.
Yeah, okay. I do have a burning share about this, so I'll come back to it. But okay, Russell, I am very much wanting to hear from you.
I just had a question for Bill. Bill, are you aware that Donald J. Trump has conceded that Barack Obama was born in Hawaii?
Yes, and I was very disappointed in him when he said that.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
I don't think Donald Trump is perfect. Far from it.
I'd like to share just 2 minutes on this, because I actually know quite a bit about this topic. And so I'm going to try to be super pithy about it. So there's a man, his name is John Woodman, and he wrote a book called, gosh, I'm going to forget the exact title, but it's something about like, was Barack Obama's birth certificate a forgery? And he outlined 135 claims in the birtherism, what I would call the birtherism disinformation campaign. He was a Republican actually at the time that he started it. Don't shake your head, because I'm telling you information, my friend. Just take it in. It's information you haven't heard before. Just try and listen with fresh ears, because I'm sharing something with you. It might be important information. You don't know yet. So John Woodman looked into 135 claims, all of the claims that he, over years, and he invested about 6 months of his own life not getting paid to investigate these claims. And he found that there was not a single one of them that held water. Out of 135, almost all of them were false, provably false, but there were a handful that were true but irrelevant, or that were true but there was they weren't true. They were asserted, but there was absolutely zero evidence to back them up. Something along the lines of George W. Bush is secretly married to Britney Spears. It's like an assertion, but there's no evidence to support it. So if you look at that book, and I could go into this for another long, long time, actually, but if you look at that book, and I'd be happy to share this with you on a one-on-one basis. I actually created a media platform called concordis.io, because I realized that, like you and me right now, we have not had a place to go to compare notes where we can see all of those claims in one place, and all the reasons why those claims were made, and all the reasons why those claims were debunked, and the reasons they were debunked, and then to invite in Jerome Corsi and to invite in Sheriff Arpaio to let us know where we're wrong, so that we can create a shared reality around a document that can actually track all 135 of these claims. I created that platform, and we are creating that document right now, so that you and I will have a place to go where we can create a shared reality with each other. So anyway, I'm kind of an expert on that topic, and I'm trying to tell you, like, I would love to have a conversation with you about it, because I'd love to have that. That's all. So anyway, yes, Janet.
I found a video that said that Donald Trump was born in Scotland, so he's not eligible to be president.
Yeah, I'm sure Donald Trump was born in Scotland. I'm pretty sure that was a true video.
The mom is from Scotland. She's not a natural born citizen, so she went
Totally.
to her parents in Scotland, and when she didn't know if she was pregnant until she got there, and then she stayed with her parents. She gave birth, and then they made up, and he said, "Come back, my son." That's the whole story, but it sounds believable, but it's like there's all these stories. I can't tell you if it's true or not, but
Yeah.
yeah, another one.
May I say something?
William, you want to say something?
There's evidence that McCain was not eligible to be president either, because he was not born on United States territory when his parents were stationed in Panama. He was actually born in a hospital that was outside that military zone, which made him ineligible to be president. So what I'm saying is both parties, both sides can, do what they want to do, because if they run into a situation, they just cover it up.
Well, I just, I hear what you say about John McCain. I'd just like to have all of us have what's called intellectual humility, which is just the willingness to be wrong. Just like we don't know, we think we have opinions, we think it's true. We could just have open minds about it. That way we can have productive conversations. That's all. I hear what you say. It may be true, it may not be true, I don't know. But anyway, let's continue with the thing. I actually am a little bit afraid that I'm not going to be able to get through the whole thing now. So
I'm sorry.
No worries. No, not your fault at all. I just want to get on track.
You see, the tactical subversion about which I'm talking is similar to the martial art, the Japanese martial art. If some of you are familiar with that tactic, probably you will remember that if an enemy is bigger and heavier than yourself, it would be very painful to resist his direct strike. If a heavier person wants to strike me in the face, it would be very naive and counterproductive to stop his blow. The Chinese and Japanese judo art tells us what to do. First, to avoid the strike, then to grab the fist and continue his movement in the direction where it was before, right? Until the enemy crashes in the wall. You see? So, what happens here? The target country obviously does something wrong. If it's a free democratic society, there are many different movements within the society. There are obviously, in every society, there are people who are against this society. They may be simple criminals, ideologically in disagreement with the state policy, conscientious enemies, simply psychotic personalities who are against anything, right? And finally, there are a small group of agents of a foreign nation, bought, subverted, recruited, right? The moment all these movements will be directed in one direction, right? This is the time to catch that movement and to continue it until the movement forces the whole society into collapse, into crisis, right? So that's exactly the martial art tactic. We don't stop an enemy. We let him go. We help him to go in the direction we want him to go.
Right, so this kind of social engineering, you just encourage people to get into battles with each other. You encourage young people to be, following really unhealthy fads that their parents hate. You get people to do things that are against their own best interests, to waste time with drugs or too much drinking or just stupid, terrible culture like, can't remember the name of that guy's show in the 90s. He was, famous, Jerry Springer. So if you have Jerry Springer and you have like the Kardashians and all this kind of garbage culture, people can't, they don't have time, or they don't have the capacity, they don't have healthy relationships. They can't really take good care of their lives and be responsible citizens. So that's one of the aspects of it. You just help people. People want to drink, okay, have them drink more. People want to be lazy, have them be more lazy. People can't get along, okay, have them, get into worse fights, things like that. So the number 2 phase is destabilization phase, lasts 2 to 5 years. It begins with the election of a charismatic populist leader. And I think Donald Trump's election really fits that characterization. The thing is, right, so what you do is you sow so much discontent and distrust of the establishment that everyone's crying out for a populist leader to be elected. And if you remember 2016, on the one hand, you had Trump, and on the other hand, you had Bernie Sanders, who also was a very anti-establishment character. Either one of them would have fit the bill of a charismatic, to their own audiences, populist leader, right? And it's just a symptom of both sides being sick to death of the status quo. That's what you want. If you want to destroy the institutions of society, get people to hate their own government and distrust their own government. So that obviously was about 4 years ago that Donald Trump was elected, right? And during this, anyway, I'm going to share with you this one little video.
The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems.
Okay, so the economy has obviously been crashed, right? The last quarter, the US economy shrank by 1/3, which was by far the greatest loss of capacity in history, right? And the whole world actually is going through the same kind of crash in terms of the economy. He says defense systems and international relations. In terms of international relations, Donald Trump has kind of withdrawn and isolated the United States by withdrawing from important international treaties and by alienating allies and things like that. In terms of destroying defense systems, that hasn't really happened in the United States, to my knowledge, although cybersecurity and election security hasn't been really what it should be. But we're not being set up for an invasion. We're not going to get invaded. The United States is not going to be getting invaded. That's an absurd proposition, but it's being set up to either have a civil war, which is probably the most likely scenario, or get taken over without a single shot being fired. So the next phase is the crisis phase, which will last 2 to 5 months. The institutions of society are brought into overwhelm and no longer function. Non-elected groups seize power. We're entering that phase pretty shortly. Yes, I think we're all on the same page about that, actually.
We're already in it.
Yeah, I don't think so, actually, because people aren't getting shot in the street that much yet. I think
But where are
when we really enter
non-elected
the
people
crisis
taking,
phase, you'll know it. Huh?
where are non-elected people taking power?
Where is that happening?
Portland. What about the Chaz or Chaz thing
That's fair.
that where they took over a few city blocks
That's
and
true. That's true.
wasn't that a
That's
non-elected power
That's a
taking?
good point. Non-elected people seizing power. That's true. Although they gave it back, is my understanding. They didn't
Yeah, that was
fight
in
to
Seattle.
keep it with guns. So I
Right. What
think
about
that when you see non-elected groups seizing power, if they are challenged, then what Yuri Bezmenov says, they just take it by force. If power is denied to them, then they just take it by force. That's not what you saw in Portland. So I think when that
well,
happens, it'll be a very different character.
actually, I misspoke. The other thing happened in Seattle, but in Portland, we have over 80 days of nightly riots, which the police can barely contain, and people are getting killed. Now, that's a form of power being exerted over a city.
Yeah, so if I heard you right, then you're under the impression that the riots in Portland are kind of overwhelming the police.
Yes, they are.
You know, my son just moved to a suburb of Portland, and I was speaking with the person he's staying with there, and she said it's really very contained to just a couple blocks, and you wouldn't even know that it's happening unless you were really close by it.
Well, it's still, affecting the city. I don't know where your relative lives, your son lives, but from what I can see, at least a good portion of Portland is endangered.
Right. So where
And
do
the
you get that idea?
police may have it contained, but they're struggling.
Where
And
do you
they're,
get those ideas from?
I get it from what I see on Fox News, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. So Fox News probably, in my perspective, is probably exaggerating.
They're showing what's happening on videos just about every day in the morning. They're showing all the video from the night before where people were throwing rocks, bottles, fireworks, other explosives at the police, and the police are taking casualties.
Yeah, I would check with other news sources like local Portland news sources, local newspapers, local news TV stations.
What news sources do you look at?
Well, I talked to someone who lives in Portland, so that's how I got my information. I also saw, I don't know the name of it, but I did check up on that because I was curious about it, and the local Portland news source that I looked at was like, it's not like that.
Okay.
It's not like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway,
okay.
Just check.
From what I understand, the left-wing mainstream media sources that are not covering what's going on in Portland.
Right. So you're just kind of proving my point, right? Because you don't trust other Americans to tell the truth. So we live in a divided country, right?
Exactly. You're right about that.
You happen to have one perspective that you feel 100% sure is true, is kind of the impression I'm getting from you. But other Americans are the perpetrators. You don't have any trust with them. You don't have a shared sense of community with them.
I believe what I see with my eyes. I don't necessarily agree with everything Fox News people say, but when they show videos of something that's happening, I believe my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I could share some things about that with you, that Fox News has been shown to replay video from weeks prior and barely letting their users know or their viewers know that the video is actually very out of date. I wonder if you're aware of that.
Well, let's put it this way. Donald Trump said not too long ago, he said that Fox News is not trustworthy anymore. He said it himself. Okay, so if we can't trust us, if we conservatives on the right cannot trust Fox News anymore, then there's not too many other people we can trust, any media types.
That's a very, you said a lot right
so
there.
So if what you're saying is true, then they're succeeding not only in dividing the country, but, you know, turning people away from any source of information.
Yeah, basically, if you, and this happens on Maui where I am, I have a lot of people I know who have some pretty out there theories about what's going on. And as long as people disagree with what's happening and what the problems are and what the solutions are, they're not in a community. They might be thinking that they're in a community, but they're actually not. And they can't coordinate their actions and defend themselves together as long as they're not in agreement about what's happening. And so this is a classic active measures divide and conquer thing where you could just render, you know, hundreds of millions of people completely incapable of defending themselves simply by having each of them believe a different reality. So anyway, that's basically what you're saying. I wonder, can I ask you a question? So now that
I'd like to ask you a
this,
question.
yeah.
All right, you're saying this active measures is was created by the Russians, the Soviet Union?
Well, that's the story, right? So in my perspective, the US and the USSR were in a Cold War all over the world, which was not a shooting war, but it was very much a war with a lot of proxy wars going on, where the United States would be trying to take over a country, and then the Soviet Union would also be trying to take over that same country. And the way that they were trying to do it is through active measures processes. So if you have a country that you want to take over, you want to have like a blueprint for how you want to take it over. You don't make it up every time. You don't play it by ear. You have a system that you follow, and it's a rational system that was developed over the course of decades or centuries. And that process was used by the US and the USSR during the Cold War. So that's, and probably against Russia itself by the KGB. So that's kind of where I think it came from, is both countries.
My follow-up question is, if Russia, when it was a communist country, Soviet Union, created this active measures, do you think they might have shared it with the communist Chinese?
Well, if they did, the communist Chinese didn't really pick up on it very well because they're murdering Uyghurs now in their own country. So they obviously don't know how to demoralize the Uyghurs into doing what they want them to do. It just creates a lot of trouble.
They don't need to. Whoops.
Uh-oh,
Oh, shit.
we might have lost William.
I'm back.
Oh, there you are.
There, yeah.
Sorry. Well, they don't need to defeat the Uyghurs from within, because the Uyghurs are under their jurisdiction as part of the Chinese country. They're part of China.
Right, but with an active measures technique, they could probably just exploit them to no end, just by psychologically manipulating them.
They can round them up and put them in concentration camps and re-educate them.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
It seems like a lot more work to do it that way, to me. So
I think it's a lot less work and it's a lot quicker.
Could be, maybe. Yeah, I imagine they probably shared it with them, but I'm not 100% sure that that's true, actually, so I don't know.
Well, I think that they did share it with them, and the Chinese are using active measures against us too at the same time.
Yeah, could be. Can I continue with the talk? Is that okay?
Sure. I'm sorry.
Okay. No worries.
Trying to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized."
So you can see the reality upside down nature and the Orwellian nature of the language that's being used. So normalization is anything but normal, where the public is controlled through violence and threats of violence. What Yuri Bezmenov says is that before crisis and normalization, there can be like women's lib and kids lib and prison lib and all these things. After normalization, there's no lib whatsoever. And all you have is like good old proletariat equality and freedom. But that basically means, you know, people are really, really bad off. So the demoralization phase is where most of the work gets done, because it's the longest phase by a long shot. It takes decades to demoralize a people into not being able to see the truth, no matter how much truth is presented to them. So there are a lot of goals to accomplish in that time that help along with the process. The first is to destroy religion, right? And to politicize it and to commercialize it. So if you are a Republican and you believe that people who are voting for Democrats are going to hell, that is a perfect example of the demoralization of religion and the politicization of religion. If you think Democrats are evil, if you call them democrats, for example, because they, you know, they provide women with abortion rights, right? Which is something that is very normal around the world, very standard around the world. But because of the conversations that are happening from major media outlets in the United States, Democrats in the United States are demonized. It's seen to be some kind of hell, evil, instead of just a normal thing that people want. That's just part of, you know, part of human life that has a lot of gray areas in it in terms of morality. So, and the commercialization of religion is apparent in something called prosperity theology, where priests or pastors or, you know, sermonizers will tell people to give as much money as they can to the church, and then God will kind of reward you later because he really likes you a lot. So that kind of really, I get a little bit of an emotional reaction. It's such a disgusting perversion of Christianity. It really bothers me a lot. But that's what you do with religion, because if people are genuinely spiritual people, they can't actually be demoralized, because if people refuse to look at other people as the enemy, people are not participating in this process. It requires people to look at other people as evil. If you want to love everyone and you are committed to loving everyone, and nothing anybody ever is going to tell you is going to stop you from loving everyone, you are not participating in the active measures process, and your peace of mind and your relationship with the divine and relationship with your own human heart has to be destroyed in order for you to be a willing participant. So another way to, you know, to get to demoralize people is to create distrust in the media, create distrust in government institutions such as the courts, the FBI, the State Department. Destroy, this is key, destroy any shared source of truth, like the courts, the FBI, right? We used to have FBI investigations, used to create a shared reality for all Americans. The Mueller report came out and it did not create a shared reality among Americans. That's obviously not a shared source of truth anymore. Why? Because our media tells us different stories around it, and they do not accept the results of those investigations for their own reasons, which we do not know why they're doing what they're doing, but they are not accepting the institutions of society as being valid and trustworthy. And so those messages of distrust land on their viewership, and those viewers take in that information, and those viewers then don't trust FBI investigations either. That's kind of how it works. So then you want to distrust science, you want to distrust the media, you want to distrust elections if you're trying to destroy a country, right? So if you think elections are not trustworthy sources of truth, and you don't want to go along with what they say, and you're going to kill people, you know, after the election happens, you know, you can guess that this is an active measures technique, right? Because all of this has been destroyed. All of this Yuri Bezmenov predicted. So this is an active measures process that we're being walked through. So wherever an institution is respected, right, like the FBI or like police or the military or the media isn't universally, was probably never universally respected, but generally respected. The presidency, Congress, right, the Supreme Court, if these things are respected, that creates community. What you have to do is create a reality upside down situation so that half the people hate the president, half the people at least hate Congress, half the people hate the police, things like that. And not only hate them, but think that they're a threat to human dignity and human well-being in the country itself. And that way you have two communities, and they all want the truth, right? This is the total funny ironic, horrible thing about it is you and me, William, we have disagreements about things, but we both want the truth to prevail. But if you convince good faith people who both want the truth to prevail to fight each other, then you're just manipulating the hell out of them. It's just an unbelievable situation, but that's the situation we're in. So
And that's what they're doing.
yeah, there are people who are telling us the stories, right? They are the media. The media are conditioning each community to believe certain things, to fight with each other, to dehumanize them. Like if I see someone with a MAGA hat, I immediately tell myself a story about that. If some people, they see someone with a mask and they immediately tell themselves a story about that, maybe that story is like, that person's other. That person's not one of my tribe, right? And then if I have that story going on inside me, then I don't even see the other person as human. I'm not sensitive to their needs. I'm not connected with that other person on a heart level. And that degrades society, actually. That's kind of what, social demoralization is all about. Destroying human relationships, appropriate human relationships, healthy human relationships. So create distrust in law and order, the police. I mean, is this not exactly what's happening right now? Courts,
That's exactly what's happening right now.
Prisons are like a mess in my perspective because they've been handed over to private hands then you have private companies who have the power to inflict violence on other Americans. That's like not the way I'd like it to be, and the military. Always widen social divides, never allow them to be healed, right? Over decades, right? Never allow controversies to be resolved, never reduce stress in society. So why do we have mass shootings? And let's like people pretend that the mass shootings aren't happening. And they're just stressing society out more and more every year, every year, every year. That's not a normal way for a society to take care of itself. So back to the conservative manifesto. This is kind of the heart and soul of the whole talk, if you ask me, which brings all of what we learned about active measures and it brings it into the conservative world, right? Into the conservative, dogmatic, ideological world. And this is a document. You can look it up. I didn't make it up. I think I have not heard anyone say that this document is not authentic. I've never heard anything like that said. You can find it on archive.org. Archive.org is an archiving site on the internet. What they do is they just send out bots to go and scrape websites, and then they just store those files forever. And they, to my knowledge, haven't been shown to be fraudulent or disinformation outlet themselves. And they claim that they got this from the Free Congress Foundation's website, which was an organization that Paul Weyrich founded and ran. So let's try to find some similarities between this manifesto and active measures techniques. So psychological manipulation, social engineering. So what it says in the manifesto is we are replacing political activism with cultural activism as the center of our focus. Okay, so they're in the social engineering business now. They're not in political activism anymore. We must perform a brutally honest analysis of what motivates human beings, whether that motivation be attractive or not. We must channel undesirable impulses to serve good purposes, right? So that's psychological manipulation, right? And tell me if we're on the wrong page or if I'm mischaracterizing anything, okay? And us versus them, insider versus outsider mentality is a very strong motivation in human life. For better or worse, this has to be recognized and taken advantage of for the good of the movement. That is the essence and breath of active measures. That is the soul of active measures right there. Tell me if I'm mischaracterizing something or if you don't agree. That us versus them, they are going to manipulate people's enemy images in order to win and change society as they want to. That is the essence of it. And that's why Steve Bannon said darkness is good. Destroy society's institutions. We will not try to reform the existing institutions. We only intend to weaken them and then eventually destroy them. Could it be any clearer? This is the Council for National Policy, okay? This is Steve Bannon's group. This is Kellyanne Conway's group. This is the father of birtherism, Jerome Corsi's group. And this is Tom Fitton's group, who runs Judicial Watch, okay? Who's been on Fox News countless times. I'm just gonna read it again because I really want to live in a shared reality with you around this. We will not try to reform the existing institutions. They are not cooperating with society as it is. They're not in a state of cooperation to strengthen and improve existing institutions. We only intend to weaken them and eventually destroy them. That's active measures. The seeds we sow now will have dramatic repercussions over the long term. That's active measures. We need to break down before we can build up. That's demoralization. That's active measures. And the italics are in the original, which lets you know that it was emphasized. While the intention is to, quote, is to change, quote, the overall character of American popular culture, unquote, through the, quote, aggressive dissemination of our cultural values, unquote, quote, we will be seen as a purely defensive movement, not interested in imposing our views on anyone. So that basically means not only are they full of BS, quite frankly, but they're using front groups in order to do their work for them, which is a conceal your hand active measures technique. Again, behind front groups, the visibility of the movement will be less pronounced. Even though they wanted to basically destroy the institutions of society, the you know, the visibility of the movement, it will be less pronounced. It's like, I mean, it's really quite something for me. And we will use guerrilla tactics to undermine the legitimacy of the dominant regime. So they'll use guerrilla tactics, right? So that might mean using fake email lists to send out fake emails to people, use like 4chan or 8chan to spread disinformation. You know, you name it. Guerrilla tactics kind of covers the gamut of anything not owned by a legitimate organization. And being aggressive and divisive is a very strange thing for a Christian organization to want to do. We will maintain a constant barrage of criticism against the left. We will attack the very legitimacy of the left. And William, I wouldn't be at all surprised if you would agree with me. You probably believe that the left is not legitimate. Do you believe that?
Oh, no, I believe the left is very legitimate because they are the ones that are actually doing things that you're saying the conservatives wanted to do.
Okay,
and that's
well,
one thing they do. They blame their opponents for doing what they actually want to do and are actually doing.
Right. So I hear that for you, the left is actually doing all these things that I'm describing. And it sounds like you're implying the right isn't doing any of them.
No.
So even though this document was written under the direction of the father of modern conservatism,
well, that may be what you
has nothing
call
to do with
him,
what they were doing.
I don't know who this guy is. I know nothing about him.
You can look him up. Yeah, you can look him up.
I will.
I'm telling you that when you look him up, you're going to find out that he's known as the father of modern conservatism, and that this document was created.
That doesn't mean that's what he really is.
Right.
Because
so I'm concerned right now. What's coming up for me is that I'm trying to give you genuine, authentic, important information, and you are dismissing it.
I see the information is genuine. You're just blaming the wrong people for generating it. You're blaming the conservatives for generating it. But I see stuff that is not conservative. These words you are quoting are not conservative words.
Totally. I understand our disagreement now, or our miscommunication now, because I do not intend to say that conservatives are responsible for this. I don't think anyone on the receiving end of this manipulation is responsible for this. And I do believe that some quote unquote conservatives, including Paul Weyrich, is actually responsible for it. And I also believe that others on the left are also responsible for it. I told you that I didn't trust the New York Times. I think the New York Times is responsible for it.
Okay.
They didn't include any of this information. They could have done that at any time. I've sent this information to the Atlantic magazine. You think I have faith that the Atlantic magazine is on the up and up? part of active measures is you control the entire field. You don't control just half the field. You control the whole field. You're at war. You're at war. And if you want to win a war, you own both sides of the thought leadership, the media, the political leaders, so that you actually control the conversations that happen and the conversations that don't happen. And so I don't think that conservatives, genuine Christians who actually love God and Jesus, and any other spiritual person who genuinely just wants to have a nice day and wants everyone to be happy, none of those people are on the delivery end of this system that I'm describing, right? Sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists, white supremacists, I would probably include in that group. People who want a war, who want to kill 100 million Americans. Those are the people who are on the delivery end of this. And so I'm just trying to tell you, on both sides are being played. That's what active measures is all about. You don't just do one side, you own the whole thing. So anyway, does that help us to be on the same page?
Yes, but for me, actions speak louder than words. And the people I see that are acting on these words are the left.
Okay, I hear you. Janet, you have your hand up, and I know we have only 9 minutes left. So
honor our time commitments of 2 hours, and we're coming up with 10 minutes left, and I want to negotiate. Do we want to come back again another time?
I want to hear from Russell.
And should we do some kind of questions from everybody? And you can, Melissa, we can turn you on. If you have a question, raise your hand. Would that be, and then we could negotiate if we want to do this again next week or whatever, because we're not going to get through it all, obviously. And I'm sure people have questions.
I may be able to go through the slideshow in the next 9 minutes, but I would love to come back. There's so much more to share.
Great.
I agree. I find that I'm just getting started. I have a lot more to say too.
Great. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to hear from me, but I have a lot more to say.
We all have a lot more to say. Okay, so let's take so what do you want to do? Sasha wants Russell to say something. Russell, what would you like to say?
Let him try to finish. Let him try to get the rest of his presentation in. I'll shut up.
Okay, do you want to do that, Ray?
Okay.
Do you want him to finish the slideshow?
Sure. I'll try.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and finish.
What do you vote?
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll maintain a constant barrage of criticism against the left. We'll attack the very legitimacy of the left. We will endeavor to knock our opponents off balance and unsettle them at every opportunity. This is reminiscent of Newt Gingrich, if you ask me. Newt Gingrich believed in chimpanzee politics, which was all about coordinated aggression. You can look that up. He was basically trying to normalize viciousness, and he said that politics was a war for power. So he actually wasn't, politics for him wasn't about taking care of the American people. It was actually a war for power. So he basically approached it as a civil war where viciousness was something he was inviting and training other people to take on as ways of being. The movement must serve as a force of social intimidation. Strange for Christians to say something like that. We must be feared, totally Machiavellian, not Christian at all to my understanding, so that they will think twice before opening their mouths. So he founded the National, this is the slide I meant to put earlier in the show, where Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway, Jerome Corsi, the father of birtherism, and Tom Fitton, the father of Judicial Watch, they're all members. So this is an interesting book that was just published by a very well-respected senior Republican campaign operative. His name is Stuart Stevens, and he wrote a book. This is him. I am not saying this. He is saying this, okay? This is a Republican, a conservative, probably a genuine conservative. He said, his book says it all. It was all a lie, right? Republican strategist Stuart Stevens concludes that the Republican ideologies of limited government and fiscal responsibility were all a lie all along. And the reason that he believes that is because the Republicans were at war with the Democrats for decades on limited government, low taxes, fiscal responsibility. And as soon as Donald Trump gets in there, we have $1 trillion deficits, tax cuts for the very, very richest among us. And we throw away things like limited government. I mean, all the people who have these guns in order to protect the United States from an overreaching government are nowhere to be found when the government is tear gassing citizens so that the president can have a photo op. So, you know, anyway, his estimation is it's all a lie, right? But that would fit with the active measures idea that the ideologies are just a front for actually taking actions that are not good for the American people and demoralizing them and hurting a country over the long term. Things like, you know, giving taxes to the 1%, right? That was an idea that started with Ronald Reagan. It's trickle-down economics. It's not really well respected by the left at all. There's no reason to believe that it works through any evidence that I've ever seen. My understanding is that the middle class in this country is suffering horribly and does not get benefited by money going to the top 1% or 1% of 1%, but it still happens. Why? Because they have an ideology that they can hide behind. So how did we get here? On Newt Gingrich in the Atlantic in November 2018, 25 years after the engineering of the Republican Revolution, Gingrich can draw a direct line from his work in Congress to the upheaval now taking place around the globe. But as he surveys the wreckage of modern political landscape, he is not regretful, he is gleeful. The old order is dying, he tells me. Almost everywhere you have freedom, you have a very deep discontent that the system isn't working. And that's a good thing, I ask. It's essential, he says, if you want Western civilization to survive. Western civilization is a dog whistle for white supremacy, as we know from Representative Steve King, who said, white nationalism, white supremacy, Western civilization, when did these phrases become bad to say? And Newt Gingrich in 1975, I have an enormous personal ambition. I want to shift the entire planet, and I'm doing it. Oh, this is just the beginning of a 20 to 30 year movement. That was 35 years ago. And from a 2004 article in the New York Times quoting a senior White House aide, and this, I don't know if this is true, but it does succeed in tearing people apart and kind of foretells the creation of false narratives. The aide, the George W. Bush senior White House aide, said that the reporter lived in the reality-based community. Which he defined as people who believe that solutions emerge from blah, blah, blah. That's not the way the world works anymore. We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality, we will act again, creating new realities, which you can study too, and that's how things will sort out. We're society's actors, and all of you will be left to just study what we do. So that's active measures, creation of fake realities. So I just want to wrap up with the idea that the entire media is monopolized. That's part of active measures as well. And so you basically just get to create whatever fake narratives on either side you want. Each side is absurd. Each side has tribalism. Each side gets to say the other side's wrong. And all you have to do is escalate power struggles and get people to hate each other more and more and more and more until you actually get to have an excuse to have a civil war. And everybody thinks it's happening organically, but it's actually happening intentionally. And people are like surprised at the end when you start killing people in the street. People really don't know that it's about to happen. So that's kind of why I'm, then solutions, which I'll try to play a little bit of. It's only a minute long and I'll be done.
So the answer to ideological subversion, strangely enough, is very simple. You don't have to shoot people. You don't have to aim missiles and Pershings and cruise missiles at Andropov's headquarters. You simply have to have faith and prevent subversion. In other words, not to be a victim of subversion. Don't try to be a person who in judo is trying to smash your enemy and being caught by your hand. Don't strike like that. Strike with the power of your spirit and moral superiority. If you don't have the power, it's high time to develop it. And that's the only answer.
So that is the only answer, to fight back with the power of your spirit and moral superiority. That is, insist in your own heart never to scapegoat and otherate against other people. And if you love everyone and you're willing to empathize with everyone, that's how you prevent going along with this process. And that's it. I'm done. Thank you. I apologize for being so close to the mark.
It's good. do you want to get, everybody want to give feedback? You want to say something, Patty?
Yeah, I think it's a great analysis of what's happening nowadays. With my analysis of American history, it's been like that from the get-go. There's been a number of false flags, Lusitania, the sinking of the Maine, the Twin Towers, that are set up by a government that's supported by a benign public narrative, which is so essentially false that we've been duped all along. And we just have a continuation of slavery in various forms. Black people haven't had a fair shake since Grant withdrew our troops. And so I totally like your analysis now, but Bill is also onto something very, very core, that the whole thing is benign, but the function of government is theft of your life, of your freedom, of your choice. That's what I think. I'd like to hear what Russell says. He's a lot smarter than me.
I don't know about that, but first of all, I want to commend James on his communication style. It's very non-threatening and it opens people up, and I appreciate that. But I can't say that I heard anything new. I've been looking into the same similar things for a long time, and your presentation coordinates with scholar Nancy McLean in her book, Democracy in Chains, The Deep History of the Radical Right Stealth Plan for America. It also coordinates with the Netflix documentary, The Family, where Russian agents are infiltrating the National Prayer Breakfast to manipulate fundamentalist Christians for the goals of Moscow. And it's really interesting to me that both the left and the right accuse the other side of being in cahoots with Russia. You've got people like former Naval Intelligence Briefing Officer Malcolm Nance saying that Trump is deeply in debt with Russian oligarchs and that he's puppet of Vladimir Putin. And then you've got the right accusing the left of wanting to convert the country to socialism. And it's all a byproduct of a long-term plan from Leninist professors that have brainwashed our kids. And everybody's just kind of at odds with one another right now. And it's really at a crescendo where both the right and the left feel like this election is like the success or failure of the entire country. I have friends who, deep friends who are on board with the Trumpism or whatever you want to call it. And they think if Joe Biden gets elected that the country's lost, that we're going socialism and all that. And then there's people who think that if Trump is elected again, we have another 4 years of his speech and his behavior and his whole world view that we're doomed. So this active measures process that you pointed out really inspired in me to get beyond this and get back to connecting with people on a heartfelt level and not participating as much in this process. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Russell.
Bill? All right, Bill, you disappeared.
I've got a whole page of notes that I can say some other time.
Bill, tilt your camera so we can see it too.
And Melissa wants to say something, but James, you have control now. I gave you control. So you'll have
Can you see me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Melissa,
talk, and then Melissa
Yes.
we can hear you.
She's got her mic muted. You'll have to unmute her mic if you can figure that out.
No, she's not
I'm
muted anymore.
unmuted. Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I just want to say a heartfelt gratitude for all the heart that you put into this and presenting it to us in a very diplomatic way. It just
Right.
I really appreciate that, and no bananas in the ears, and I just have an open heart, and thank you for that. And just an open heart to contemplate. You know, what I feel going on is in this world is a felt sense, and this is, and how to be with it is very, thank you. Very,
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Do we have time for a question?
Yes.
Quick question.
I
I have a question for,
Go ahead. Yeah.
quick question for James. Okay, if you're correct in your assessment that Steve Bannon and his type of mindset are behind the implementation of the active measures, what type of end result do you think they're looking for? I mean, what type of world do you think they're trying to create?
Yeah. So Steve Bannon, there were emails that were leaked from Stephen Miller, and his communications with Breitbart and other white supremacists. And what came out as part of that leaked emails is that Steve Bannon is very, very aligned with or has a lot of sympathy for white supremacist causes. And so if you think about the United States being, looking at a mostly minority future in the near future, and you realize that there are a lot of people who are still fighting the Civil War.
Yes.
Then, and you look at, Russia being Caucasian and, maybe they're all teaming up just to support white people. And I do imagine that they want to create a civil war where there's going to be a lot of violence, and they're going to be able to push all the black and brown people away. And anyway, something like that, I would say that's where I would bet money.
Okay, I think that's a great assessment.
So, Bill, did you want to give final words? And then James, you wrap it up.
Well, I'm not sure how much time do you have left.
Well, we can't be 20 minutes, but something brief.
Say, okay. I was outline of what I think is happening today, but I'm not sure how long it would take me.
Can you do it in
Oh,
5
you're cutting out.
I'm not sure when we're going to get kicked off.
I'm cutting out?
Signed up for so many minutes.
Okay.
Might end us on. So if you could kind of keep it brief, we might be able to get it in. Are you going to say something, Bill?
Is she talking? I can't hear her.
She's asking you if you want to say something brief.
I'll try to make it brief. If I go too long, just cut me off. Okay, we have to go back to when Joe Biden was Obama's vice president. He and his son made deals with the Chinese and the Ukrainians to enrich themselves. Now, that was during the Ukrainian administration was corrupt, which has since been replaced. But the Chinese still have the same government, no matter who's in charge. Okay, so now, Trump comes along and he stands up to the Chinese and he negotiates new trade deals. And by all accounts, they favored the United States, and the Chinese kind of lost there. Okay, fast forward to when Biden becomes the presumptive nominee. Shortly after that, you have the Chinese accidentally release the virus. And the next thing you know, a guy named, Trump obviously was over his head as far as expertise where a pandemic was concerned. So he turned to Dr. Deep State Fauci for advice. Dr. Fauci quickly recommended that we shut the country down, which we mostly did. Okay, now, who's going to benefit from this? Well, the Chinese and Joe Biden stand to be president. And what I see happening is if Biden is elected, the Chinese win and they take over the country.
Okay.
And that fits in with a lot of things you said, that one side is going to win or one side is going to lose. And this is the critical moment. If Trump wins, like I said earlier, there'll likely be a civil war because the left is not going to accept this result again, like they did when Trump beat Hillary.
Right.
They immediately went into resistance mode after Trump was elected the first time. and they're not going to let Trump win again.
I'd like to share with you, if I may, and maybe wrap up, if that's okay. So the thrust of what I'm really saying is, I recommend that we throw away all the narratives that we have heard up to this point, and we substitute for all of those narratives the one that I've just given you, until you can come up with a good reason that it isn't accurate, because we are being played. All the narratives that we're being fed, we should be suspicious of them.
Well, what good is it going to do if I accept what you're saying and try and do what you want me to do? Is that going to change anything about what's happening today?
Well, if you were to go and listen, if you were to go and watch those videos and read the documents that I pointed out, just put 2 and 2 together, share them with people you know, call me about them, we can talk about them, and we can create a shared reality that's more accurate than the realities or perspectives that we've been hearing from the media. That's my bottom line.
Okay. Unless you can reach out to the people on the streets in most of our major cities today and get them to accept what you say, what you think will work, I don't think it's good. I think it's too late.
Well, it just needs you. There's a flyer on my website, and you could hand it out right now. You could print it out and hand it out on your street corner. I give a talk every Saturday at 3 o'clock Hawaii time every week.
Because of my health, I am confined to my home right now.
Okay,
I'm not
you
healthy
can ask
enough
other
to
people
go
to
out.
do it. You can ask other people to do it.
I apologize for that, but I was discharged from the hospital on the 6th of this month, and I'm still recuperating.
Sure, of course.
And it wasn't COVID.
Thank God. Okay, well, thank you for staying on longer. I apologize that we went 11 minutes long.
I think we're fine. I added 15 minutes, but I just didn't know when our 15 minutes would be over. So I just want to thank everybody for coming today. It's been great having you. This will be uploaded and spread out far and wide. And what did you want to say, Sasha? You're right here.
This is the whole point is you've demonstrated better than anything else active listening that made a bridge. And I just love the way you carried on this dialogue, James, and you too, Bill. Thank you both.
Yeah, thanks for having a civil.
You're welcome, both of you. Sasha, Janet, thanks for inviting me.
Well,
I actually enjoyed it.
You. Thanks,
despite being in pain the whole time.
Thanks.
Nice meeting you, Bill.
And thanks, James.
Nice meeting you too, Russell.
So, James, since I gave you
nice meeting you too, Melissa. If you're still there.
Since I gave you control, you'll have to end this. So, final word to James, and then turn us off here.
I'll end it now.
Bye.
Thank you all so much.
Goodbye. Nice meeting you.
Bye.